Today, President Barack Obama is signing into law an expanded Violence Against Women Act, extending domestic violence protections and ushering in a legislative victory for gay rights activists and Native Americans. The signing ceremony will include Vice President Biden, who authored the original Violence Against Women Act back in 1994. After months of negotiations, the Republican-run U.S. House signed off on a reauthorization of the act just last week. Survivors of domestic violence, women's organizations, law enforcement officials, tribal leaders, and members of Congress have also been invited to the White House event. Joining us right now, we have Laura Bassett, HuffPost political reporter, and Zach Carter is with us as well. Big day, Zach, for women. I mean, this is something that we've been waiting for a little bit of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Laura can probably talk about this in more detail than I can. But yeah, it's been a little bit strange to watch the sort of contortions that Congress has been going through for the past, I think, over a year now about reauthorizing something that should be, historically has been uncontroversial, a bill dealing with violence against women. There have been all sorts of weird things that the GOP has brought up as reasons to object to it, which I think Laura can probably go into more than I can.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we were dealing with technical. What was the question?
Well, Laura, talk to us about the event today, because it seems like Vice President Biden's going to be there. Can you walk us through what's going to take place?
So Obama is signing the Violence Against Women Act today. Obviously, it's been a year and a half in the making, which is far too long for most people. It's been very politically damaging to Republicans, but they did finally cave and support the bipartisan broad Senate version, which includes protections for undocumented immigrants, LGBT victims of violence, and extended protections for Native American victims. And it's a big deal that that Republicans were able to come out and support this version.
Are you going to be there, Laura?
I am going to be there. I'm really excited about it. It's the first time I've seen Obama sign a bill before, so I'm actually very excited about it.
So walk us through what happens. I've never been to a signing either. Where is it going to take place, and what goes on?
I can barely hear you. What's the question?
Maybe Zach, have you been to a bill signing?
Yeah, I saw him sign the patent bill into law a couple of years ago, and the patent reform bill, which not as high profile legislation as the Violence Against Women Act, but he held it at high school. It was great because it was my old high school. I grew up in the DC area, so I went out to my high school and there was this huge party in the gym with a lot of really excited high school students there, really freaking out about the president being there, which it's a pretty exciting thing. But he made a lot of vague statements about the importance of patents and the economy, and then sat down and signed a bill. There were a lot of lobbyists there, actually, a lot of executives from pharmaceutical companies. That was a piece of economic legislation where the constituents are mostly corporate elites, not ordinary men and women who are victims of violence like this is.
Well, and obviously a big day for women, but not everyone was on board. This was, as you said, Laura, a controversial bill. I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe Zach can pass along my questions, but why was this bill so controversial?
I think for a number of reasons. There were some Republicans that couldn't support it because they said that some of these issues should be up to the states, allocating money for domestic violence programs. Other issues, obviously, were the extended protections for undocumented immigrants. That was difficult for Republicans to support. The extended protections for LGBT victims. They felt like that was a political football that the Democrats had used to ensure that they couldn't support it. Actually, the biggest sticking point was the provision for Native American women who had been abused by white men on tribal lands. It gives tribal courts the jurisdiction over those cases, because as it happens now, if a Native woman gets abused by a white man on tribal lands, oftentimes there just aren't the resources for the other courts, for the regular U.S. district courts to go in and prosecute those crimes, and men know that, and so the rate of rape and sexual assault on those lands is way higher than it is elsewhere, and so this allows tribal courts to prosecute those crimes. And I think a lot of Republicans, particularly Eric Cantor, had a huge problem with that. They were afraid that tribal courts were going to be unfair to non-tribal men. Obviously, they've been able to put that past them.
Yeah, Tom Cole had a really interesting statement about that a couple of years ago. Tom Cole's one of the few members of Congress who actually is of American Indian descent, and he was like, yeah, people have this weird idea in some corners that after hundreds of years of genocide and discrimination, there's going to be all of this retribution that's coming through the domestic violence courts in tribal lands, and he was working really hard to try and dispel that as something that was kind of a racist myth.
Well, we are making strides.
Tribal courts are already really limited in what they can do. I think the maximum sentence they can even give out is 3 years for anything. So I'm not sure what people were really afraid of.
Well, it's a big day, guys. Thanks so much for keeping us in the loop. Let's move on to the next one, though. Yesterday, the Arkansas House of Representatives voted 56-33 to override Governor Mike Beebe's veto on a ban of abortions after 12 weeks of pregnancy. The vote now ensures that the most restrictive abortion law in the country will go into effect. Under the new law, doctors who perform abortions on a woman who is more than 12 weeks pregnant will lose their medical license unless the woman is a victim of rape or incest, her life is in danger, or the fetus has a highly lethal abnormality. Republican supporters of the bill argue that abortion should be banned that early in a pregnancy because the fetal heartbeat can be detected at that point. Arkansas is the first state to pass a 12-week ban. Laura and Zach, I mean, this is pretty big news.
This is a really big deal. It's by far the most restrictive abortion ban we've seen in the country. Roe v. Wade protects abortions up until 22 to 24 weeks, which is when it's generally considered, the fetus is generally considered to be viable outside of the womb. And so this is half that time. It's basically before a lot of women even realize they're pregnant. And the bill actually is going into effect now. So expect some seriously contentious court cases.
What happens from here, though, Zach? I mean, as you said, it's going to be contentious. So what's the aftermath going to be?
Well, I mean, I think there's a long-term strategy among state anti-abortion activists to intentionally create these state laws that would conflict with Roe v. Wade because they're trying to get a Supreme Court case heard on it. And I think what the long game here is to eventually, with 50 different states enacting, each one enacting a different type of anti-abortion bill. Not all states are doing this, but those that are, it creates a lot of different types of court challenges. And I think the hope for anti-abortion activists is that eventually one of them gets through. If it does, it'll face a very long uphill battle, and it would actually have to be picked up by the Supreme Court. And it's not obvious that the Supreme Court wants to do that. In a lot of cases, the Supreme Court might just say, okay, whatever, we think this is fine. It can be revised at the federal level multiple times, depending on what kind of rulings different courts put down. But I would expect, several years of litigation over this. And on the other, I mean, we've seen several other similar bills in conservative states over the last couple of years. So I don't think this dramatically changes that legal landscape, but it is one more item on the list.
It's definitely not the last time we're going to be talking about it. But guys, thanks so much for being with us. Laura, have a great time today at the Violence Against Women Act signing. That should be a great time.
Thank you. I will.
Thanks, guys. Coming up next, why you've given up on keeping your personal information private on Facebook.